Assalamu alaikum, boa tarde, kia ora koutou katoa. I'm making this video right now. It's perhaps a bit of a once in a lifetime one-off. I thought about this for a while, and I thought I would make a tribute video of sorts, for my mother who passed away 10 years ago, a week ago today. I didn't make this video last weekend, I was quite sick, and decided I wanted to I wanted to feel better, be in a better frame of mind and all of that. So this video is a week late, but better late than never. So yeah, I don't know, I reflected on that May the 20th, 2013. Mum passed away from cancer after what had been almost a year struggle with cancer. And as with all people, with all of us, our parents pass, and it marks the end of an era, I guess, and that faces all of us at some point. And like everybody, I'm sure, you grieve, you bury them, or cremate them in this case. You grieve for them, and that grief, never completely is gone, and comes in little waves and spurts. But by and large, you get over it, and then you start to just remember that person and what they meant to you, without the extreme emotion which comes with the initial grieving, that's for sure. But mum died at age of 57, 2013. Pretty young, but people do certainly pass away younger, and some older. You've got the time you've got. That's all you've got. So yeah. So I wanted to make this tribute video, but I didn't want to just, make a stereotypical, all of the good things, or how much you love the person, and all of their great qualities, which of course nothing wrong with that, and those things are true, and everybody has qualities that we can all celebrate and reminisce on. But I wanted to more just reminisce off the top in a more broad way, and for people who are watching this video, if you don't know me very well, and you don't know my family, and you don't know my mum, this may be of little to no interest to you, so I totally would understand if you didn't even watch on. And to be completely honest, whether anybody watches it or not doesn't really, like all the videos I've ever made, it doesn't really faze me. I do it to document things and capture things, and it's like a diary of sorts. So yeah, this is what it is. But Mum was born, and I'll just give a little bit of biographical detail. Mum was born in 1956. She was born in Tokoroa in the Waikato region in New Zealand, to my grandparents, Sam and Strathdee-Pehi. She was the oldest girl. Sorry, let me get this right. So yeah, she was the fourth child of 8, and the oldest girl. So the first girl of what turned out to be 5 boys and 3 girls. So yeah, she was. Mum was a talented. My whole family, I must admit, on my mum's side, very musical and talented. There's a lot of musical and performance talent and activity throughout my family. My grandfather, my uncles, my aunties, and even in the wider family, extended family. And mum was, she was a talented singer. She was a ballerina when she was younger, and she revisited that in her late 20s, I think it was, if I got that right. And she was expressive. She was a passionate, expressive person, and I grew up with that. So I grew up with around music. I grew up around singing. I grew up around performance, and mum being in bands and just loving music. So being a fan of music, and music was a big part of my life, my family's life, and I'm grateful for that. I don't say this to be fake modest or whatever, but I as much as I'm involved in music, and I love music, and I play music, and it's been a dear friend to me, I've always considered myself not particularly talented in music. I just loved it, and I put lots of time into it, and continue to, and I'm happy with that, But mum she had like an actual real talent, and that was really awesome. And mum was a fiercely independent person who did things her own way, for better or for worse, and there was a lot of both. She left home at an early age. She had Mum wanted to. She was a free spirit, and she lived a lot of her life and our lives by association, in different types of ways. She made some pretty unusual choices to do with lifestyle, and we went along for the ride because we had to. And I'm grateful for that too. I'm grateful. Mum certainly had a stuff what everybody thinks, do what you want kind of attitude for a lot of her life, and no doubt she made some pretty unpopular choices for her time, not only for the times but for within the family and community and the generation that she was in and brought up in and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, she was a fun-loving person. Mum was she was passionate, and I would say that from all directions. Like, when times were good, times were really good, and Mum was really fun-loving and literally fun. When times were bad, the passion was equally intense, so things could get really, really intense, dark, hard, challenging. So yeah, hard on your sleeve type person, and she remained that way pretty much for all of her life. When she got sick and later when it got towards the end, as you do when you're getting older and unwell, you run out of steam somewhat, but her spirit was always much the same. So I love Mum I love Mum's memory, and I love Mum in her lifetime, of course, for lots of reasons. She didn't just really teach me, but she taught me by role model, I guess, to be yourself, to take chances, to follow your heart, follow your dreams. My mum never had excessive expectations of us, or me especially, around being successful or educated or around making money. There was very little of that. None that I can actually remember specifically. I certainly didn't grow up when I was with Mum with a sense of I needed to do well or be successful or anything like that. Mum was more about, following your passion and loving what you do, and go hard sort of thing. Go hard or go home. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate many things. Mum was a hard person as well, though. While she was fun-loving and kind of a bit hippie and alternative, a lot in those things actually, at times. She was a product of her upbringing as well. So she had a pretty tough, somewhat perhaps typical 1950s, 60s upbringing. She was her generation of Māori people were pretty much the first to be brought up away from the culture, the language, the marae, and our roots. So a lot of those, baby boomers, I guess we call them, right? Māori baby boomers were often the firstborn to be raised in towns and go to schools, have Pākehā neighbours, and and speak English as their first language. So yeah, Mum was a product of that, and my grandmother was she was Catholic and had a lot of those sort of Catholic values and traits. So yeah, Mum had a pretty tough upbringing, along with her siblings, and that created all sorts of like for everybody, your upbringing is the ingredients of the rest of your life, right? So there were some things that gave Mum. So I'm starting to probably get a bit repetitive and repeating myself. So I sort of want to touch on some different areas. Yeah, Mum was a great person, loving person, passionate person, talented, free-spirited, all of those things, absolutely. But she was a complicated person as well. She had some dark demons, which I realized many years later that the free-spirited running away from the mainstream was not purely motivated by alternative living, or being a hippie, or being free-spirited, like I keep saying. There was an element of it that was running from her past and her inability perhaps to deal with her earlier life, like in my youth and before I was born, like even her childhood. She was complicated in that way, and those complications and difficulties led to different things, elements of her life and our lives. I'll say it, Mum she had an addictive personality. She struggled with addiction in certain ways. She was an addictive person, and those demons and dark parts of her life that she struggled and strived to escape and run from caused all sorts of things. We had elements of stress and violence in our lives. Mum moved around a lot when I was a kid, especially in the period when I was growing up in primary school. We were forever moving. We were moving on a whim. I went to about 13 schools by the time I left school, and 10 or 11 of those were just primary schools. So in that period of time, which was sort of like, I guess the 80s pretty much. Yeah, the 80s, when I was sort of from about 5 to 15 or 14. We went all over the place. We lived in unusual circumstances, in tents and caravans, in the wops, in the middle of nowhere. We had urban stops as well, so it was all over the place. And my parents, my mum and dad married before I was born, maybe not so long before I was born. Mum was 19 when I was born. My dad was 21 or 2 when I was born. That's 1975. My parents didn't last very long as a couple, to be honest. Maybe a couple of years. My dad's he's very philosophical, and he's good about it. He says he'll say things like, "Oh, Brent, this is a funny one, but he's got a dark sense of humor." He'll say, because he's been a builder. His working life was as a builder, and he says, "Brent, we were young, and it's like we were told to build a house, but all we had was a pocket knife. We just didn't have the tools." And I understand what he means. He's a very self-deprecating, my old man. He's never run my mum down or said anything negative. If anything, he runs himself down. He'll even say, "Oh, Brent, if I knew then what I know now, I'd still be with your mum, if she was alive," sort of thing. So he's good like that. But yeah, so my parents didn't last very long. They came from different worlds. My mum was obviously from a Māori family, born and raised in the upper North Island, in a Māori family with Māori culture / 1950s urbanisation drift culture as well. That was kind of a hybrid of Māori people moving to the cities for the first time. And my old man is from Dunedin, and he was born into a very working class Pākehā Scottish stock family, and they just came from very opposing worlds. So, something attracted them to each other, and I'm sure they had some good times, but they didn't last. So yeah, so my mum, I grew up with my mum as a result, not with my dad. I built a relationship with my old man sort of as an adult, really. But anyway, my mum was a great woman. That's so cliche, right, to say that, and everybody should, I guess, rightfully say that about their mums, because they are. But she was great in very, very extreme different ways, and it could be as bad as it could be good. It could be as joyful as it could be painful, and but she was an interesting, complicated, passionate, tough woman. She was tough, if not anything else. Tough physically, tough mentally, tough in spirit, but also really, really loving. So I guess that's the term, right? Heart. When you wear your heart on your sleeve, you lay it all out there. So if things were bad, look out. If things were good, they were really good. I think my mum struggled too, not only with the factors or elements of her actual upbringing, but culturally as well, a lot of I think that's quite common. And to be completely honest, a lot of those baby boomer age Maori people who grew up the first to be brought up in urban settings, without strong knowledge of self, of culture, of language, a lot of them continue to struggle with identity. And like when you're a Maori person who can't speak Maori, you don't really know the culture, but you're not Pākehā at the same time, so you like anywhere around the world, if you're in the same situation, you're drifting in a no man's land. So that ability to be confident in yourself and know who you are and where you're at and where you're from is compromised, to put it nicely. So mum, like many of her age group, struggled with that. I don't know, I never asked her this, I don't know if I did ask her this, but I would say that there were 3 significant, hang on, let me get this right. No, there's more than 3. I'm going to talk about 3 significant men in her life, which was like my father, my brother's father, Damien, who's also a big part of my life, who she met around 1980 when I was 5. And then many years later, she married John, and he's her widower to this day. And they're all Pākehā men. For whatever that means. I don't want to read too much into that and make a big thing of it. But yeah, mum was not attracted to Māori men, that's for sure. I never knew of any. And that's when mum got sick and older, she died young, so she never got to be old, bona fide old. But when she got older, I actually appreciate that. I think she came to terms more so with her own issues of anger and resentment of the past and identity. She started to be a bit more honest about those things and actually kind of admit them to herself mainly, and try to deal with them. But but it's good. That's a good thing. But of course, it came pretty late, and then her life wasn't long enough to perhaps really go there and deal with them, so that she could, in a satisfactory manner, say that she's really sort of dealt with it. But anyway, it is what it is. I love mum dearly, with all of the problems, with all of the stress, with all of the tough things that. Okay, here's another little tangent. A lot of her traits, I'm nearly 50. I mean, I'm coming up 48, and I'm starting to recognize them in myself more. Some of it's nature, some of it's nurture. Some of it might be just simply that I'm like her, because I'm her son. And then other things might be more like learned behavior or reaction to learned behavior and circumstances. Yeah. I'm pretty... Mum was famously amongst her friends and family pretty... is the word listless? You sort of move, you just... you don't settle. You just keep moving. And I'm like that. I grew up like that, and then I became like that. Again, I'll never know, I think, whether it's nature or nurture. Or in reality, it's probably a combination, right? So I struggle to settle down. But at the same time, I'm not suggesting that that's a problem. I mean, I love my life, and I'm happy with my life. I'm grateful to be this way. I'm up for the adventure, and I'm not apologizing for that. But at the same time, I do concede that it's not everyone's cup of tea. And even in my own family, with my children, my ex-wife, these things have played a part. I can't deny that, and I'm not trying to make excuses about it. And I'm certainly not blaming mum either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to. The point of this is not to find someone to blame for whatever. I'm just expressing it that I'm like her in many ways, and good and bad. I like to think, just like we all are like our parents in all sorts of ways. So yeah. What can I say? This is my impromptu, totally unscripted thoughts about mum. I mean, I could make a 10-hour video about mum. I mean, it's anyone who knows her knows that there's a million and one stories, and there's a million and one theories, and there's a million and one experiences, and there's a million and one problems / good times. But I don't know. I just wanted to acknowledge mum after 10. You know, she's been gone for 10 years. Express my love for her, but also my acknowledgement that, you know, this was a human being. I mean, how much is that stating the obvious? But I mean that in the sense of no one's perfect. We've all got issues. We all do the best we can, and we navigate them the best we can, and we try to do more good than not. And in that sense, mum was like everybody else. But yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for mum. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful that, well, I have life, as we all do, have life because of our parents. But I'm grateful for the good times. I'm grateful for the hard times. I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for the things that she taught me to do and not do by doing them. Yeah, so anyway, love you, mum. Aroha nui mo ake tonu atu. And if you were listening to this video, take from it what you will. And yeah, if you knew mum, remember her, take a moment, and all the best. Aroha nui. Ka kite anō.